Hi, my name's Leon Rowe, currency trader and trading coach at trading180.com, and welcome to this week's supply and demand Forex technical analysis. I hope you all had a great trading week last week. Yeah, let's get into the technicals for this week. I'm going to be breaking down also a trade on the pound Swiss that I got short on, and really kind of going into a bit more depth into my thought processes behind the trade, just to show you a bit of an insight into how I look at supply and demand and the overall bigger picture of my analysis. So let's get into our usual US dollar index, right? So this week's supply and demand zones, and the reason why we use the dollar index, because the dollar index is a measure of US dollar strength, in case you don't know, against a basket of other the major currencies like the pound, euro, and the yen. And what we do is we look for supply and demand zones and strength and weakness really here, value, and then we correlate these levels with the US dollar pairs, and I'll show you an example of what I'm really talking about, right? So from the overall bigger picture, last week we pretty much came up into this supply zone right here, and then we've sold off, putting this bearish engulfing type candle, and now we're at the this demand zone right here. Yeah, so if you're looking to buy the dollar, then what you'd be doing is looking for potentially some price action here. We're not trading the dollar index. What we're looking for is we're going to be trading dollar pairs, and then looking for demand zones on the maybe the dollar yen, the dollar Swiss, dollar CAD, right? And if we get some strength in here, and obviously prices at a demand zone or a supply zone, depending on obviously if it's the New Zealand dollar US dollar pair that you're trading, that strength here should coincide with strength on the dollar on an overall perspective, right? So pretty much is going to be a first area if you see some price action on this index, right? If you don't see any price action, right, or anything that you would take, then you're pretty much just looking for a buy trade right here. As a sell trade, potentially we could be seeing, obviously this could be the start of a move potentially that will break through these demand zones. Now why is price potentially going to break through supply and demand zones? And it's really because of fundamentals and sentiment, the backdrop of currency wars. Trump has really opened his mouth and said that he wants a cheaper dollar, right? And I'm not really going to get into the technicals, get into the fundamentals, but the just know that the fundamentals are really, and sentiment is really the drivers of price and perceived value. It's not supply and demand zones. It's not candlestick patterns. These are just basically a reflection of potential supply and demand and what is happening and the decisions that traders are making, right? So we could see some dollar weakness if they want a weaker dollar, and Trump is really talking down the dollar, but there's some conflict obviously with the Federal Reserve as they are on a interest rate hiking cycle. So if you read the news, you'll start to see the conflict and what's really potentially happening, and then we can make our trading decisions. So if you are a seller and you think that there's going to be some shorting opportunities, then this area here is probably going to be the area at the moment to look for any kind of pullback in the dollar, and then look to get short. And again, you correlate that with any supply zones on any US dollar currency pairs, right? So those are your options for now for this week potentially, right? Looking to buy the dollar, these are the areas, right? So going on to the dollar yen. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the supply and demand technical analysis basics and what I go over every week, this is basically just a process of what I look for, and when it comes to levels, and really just it keeps me on the right side of the market potentially from a technical analysis perspective, but obviously I'm a fundamental and sentiment trader, so I make my buying and selling decisions off of fundamentals. But for technical analysis, this is basically the basics of 5 steps that you can use yourself as well when looking at supply and demand zones. So what we do is we draw some supply and demand zones, and then we look for value ranges, right? And value ranges, we're always looking for a high and a low somewhere, right? Because prices tend to trend within ranging markets, right? So what we've got first, second, range here, right? Now, probably got something right here as well, right? These are the immediate probably ranges where price may want to look to range between. So what you have is, you know, prices could range between this demand zone and this potential supply zone here, right? It could range between there. It could range between here and that high, or it can range between this level here and this high, right? So what I'm always looking for is a range, so I know that this is basically a cheap area. And if you want to know a bit more about supply and demand, expensive, cheap areas, I have an introduction into supply and demand zones in the video in the description box below. So I'm looking for a bargain area, the first bargain area, which is this demand zone, and then I'm looking for probably areas where traders looking for pullbacks, and where we have also fair value, which is basically represented by these kind of golden lines around here. Now, with the supply and demand order equation, what I'm looking for is where other traders are looking to buy and sell, right? Supply and demand orders, right, where they're looking to take profit, and so on and so forth. And the common one is going to be the horizontal support and resistance. So we have, you know, support here, support with resistance here, resistance, bit of resistance as well. And then traders are going to be looking at this area as a level of potential support. So I know that not only do we have supply and demand traders like myself looking at value or potential value, we also have, let me bring this visual order to the front, right? We also have horizontal support and resistance traders looking at these levels to try and look to get potentially long, right? Then we also have, and you know, we can include half and round numbers in here. So this is going to be around the 111, 111 round number as well. So we have some confluence. We also have diagonal support and resistance here. So from a long-term trend line perspective, we have, if you're looking to be a buyer in this level, we have some, you know, potential trend line traders. We're looking to zoom in a little bit, right, who are looking at this obvious level. And around here we have you know, some confluence here, and then obviously we have traders that are looking at this long-term trend line that broke and looking to trade the you know, it goes up, comes back down, and they'll be looking at trading this area here as well. It's not something that I necessarily subscribe to, but I know that other traders do it. So they're going to be, you know, again, potentially buying, right, going on here. And you have to really ask yourself as a technical trader, who's buying and who's selling and why, right? There's always a psychological element behind why we buy and sell, and we need other traders to you know, to add to the supply and demand equation. And then we have dynamic support and resistance, right? So I use the 2150, 100 and 200 SMAs and EMAs. So 100 and 200, we're pretty much below here, so we haven't necessarily got confluence with the 100 and 200, but let's look at the 21 and 50. And by the time prices do come down here, we have, you know, the 21 EMAs and SMAs, you know, coming up around here as well. And probably potentially we've got the 50 SMAs and EMAs coming up to this level around here. So I don't use moving averages to tell me which way to trade. I do that from fundamental sentiment analysis, but I know that it's a popular strategy for dynamic support and resistance, where traders will trade you know, bounces off of the moving averages. So we have a cluster of confluence from a buying perspective, and then we would look to see really from a selling perspective if we have any of these lined up. It's not mandatory, it's not a must, but if we do have anything lined up from in a supply zone area, then this is where this is what we would basically apply to the to each area and each level. So that's just a quick process of, and really the basics of how I look for supply and demand trades and areas and zones, and really the best areas. And there's obviously a lot more that goes into that as well, which you can look for on the website and our supply and demand course. So that's from a demand perspective. From a supply perspective, we really don't have anything lining up with our process, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't take the any kind of supply zones if prices do manage to come back up to here and take a short, as the the yen is a risk currency, and if we're in a risk off environment, the yen should be the stronger of the two, right? So moving on to the dollar Swiss. Again, I've done another example for you. Long term, diagonal resistance. All right, actually, matter of fact, let's go through the process again. So determining supply and demand values, value ranges. So I know that I can see a range between here and here. So price is really contained between this high and this low, and you can see that prices attempted to spike through, couldn't, and we've pretty much gone through something like this, right? And all value ranges are where buyers and sellers are in agreement. So this is going to be potentially seen as an expensive or a cheap area depending on what currency you're buying, and this is a expensive or a cheap area depending on what currency you're buying. This is going to be cheap for the dollar, this is expensive for the dollar, this is cheap for the Swiss, this is expensive for the Swiss if you're trying to get short at the moment, right? So if we get rid of the arrows, take off that. So value range, we know that if you were looking to get short, this was the optimum to try and get short and buy the Swiss. You can see these prices start to sell off. Now we're at fair value, right? So we're in this demand zone at fair value, right? Do you want to be a buyer or a seller here? Now we look to some horizontal support and resistance, and from a daily perspective, I can't really see anything clear cut. There is something here, but from the past, but yeah, actually I guess it could line up right here. And we're looking at support and resistance, right? Resistance. We've got prices have reacted in the past around there. Recently it hasn't been the strongest area, but you can see where it has reacted right around here. So potentially you could be looking at some buying opportunities right here. And one thing I also want to mention is you can also go down into an intraday time frame, right, and look for a more accurate support and resistance levels. And one that really kind of stands out to me would be this one right here. So if we just get rid of this, right, you can see support, resistance, support here, resistance, support, resistance, right? So as prices do come down within this demand zone, this would be the first area I'd be looking for to get long, right, potentially. And then what we have is an area right here as well. If I get rid of this overall bigger level, so we've got support here. If prices do again come down to this level here, this will be the second area I'll be looking to try and get long, and then so on and so forth, right? Got a level here, and then you've obviously got the lowest area here, which is going to be the best area if you're looking to buy from the dollar, right? Currency pair. So you're looking there, and then you're looking around here. So again, just looking at the overall bigger picture. If you're looking to be a buyer, those are your areas. If you're looking to be a seller, then we also have that's taken at that. So what you want to do is look for that supply zone right there, right? So there's your supply zone as we've made lower lows and lower highs. Moving on to the dollar CAD. Dollar CAD, again, this is what the supply and demand technical analysis basics look like. You have, you know, your demand zones here. This is where we could potentially range from that high to that low. So price could be contained between here and here. So if you're looking to buy the dollar, we're looking to buy the dollar in a cheap area, right? And then this could be the next cheap area potentially. If that area doesn't hold, then we've got another cheap area right here, which also lines up with fair value if this is the range that prices are going to be, you know, this area between this high and this low here, where prices are going to be ranging from. So looking for all other confluences, right? Horizontal support and resistance, got, you know, resistance here, potential support. So we could look for some price action intraday. Anywhere around here, got our diagonal support here as well. And then we've got potentially nothing on the 100 or 200, then the 21 and the 50. We also have the 50 kind of creeping up into this area here. So potentially we could have, you know, some buying opportunity here from a selling opportunity. Pretty much we're just looking for prices to come back up to here and then look to get short as we have some confluence from a diagonal resistance perspective, right? So if we're looking for prices to come back up to anywhere around here before looking to get short. Moving on to the New Zealand dollar, US dollar. Let's go to clear that. So again, we just go through the process. I don't want to basically make this video too long, right? So if we're looking to be a buyer, right, now would potentially be the time of putting this engulfing candle on the daily. Or if you're looking for an intraday entry, you'd wait for price to come back down and then look for a long. This is your first shorting area, second shorting area before looking to get short really on this currency pair, right? Again, looking for price action, going through your process as well, right? Looking for where prices potentially could be ranging from. Prices could potentially range between this area here or potentially this area here, right? So again, we'll be buying at the dollar at a cheap level here, the first cheap area, or basically looking at the dollar, the New Zealand dollar, as buying the New Zealand dollar at an expensive area, which is what you don't really want to do, right? So or if you're looking to buy the New Zealand dollar, you'd be looking at buying it right here. This would be the cheapest area. So moving on to the pound dollar. Pound dollar, same thing. What we did last week is we kind of broke through, but we didn't touch this this demand zone here. This could be potentially just a stop hunt. So I'm going to keep this demand zone right here. From a selling perspective and supply zones, we've got a supply zone right there, right? Supply. So again, if you're looking for a buying opportunity, waiting for price to probably come down into this lower end of this demand zone around the 130 level before looking at getting long. And from a shorting perspective, that's going to be the area that you're looking to get to get shorting. Shorting the dollar so shorting the pound and buying the US dollar. And again, we got quite a cluster of supply zones here. So what you would then do is look for some confluence in that area, right? So you've got resistance here, some support, resistance, support, and then this area here would be probably the most likely area. Look for some trend lines, look for some dynamic support and resistance before taking your trade. Pound, yen. Again, we came up into this supply zone here and we pretty much sold off down into this demand zone, right? So look for buying opportunities right here with the right kind of price action, right? We've got our value range from that high to that low, so price could potentially range between here for a while. So right now we're pretty much at fair value, just below fair value if you're looking to be a buyer of the pound against the yen, right? And this would be the best level here if you're looking to buy the pound. This would be the cheap area, This would be your area to try and look to get short if you're looking to buy the yen. So moving on to the pound Swiss, and really my my trade that I took this week, and I'll go into a bit more detail. So from a value perspective, I knew that this was the range from this high to this low, and so this was Monday. So what we had was, let me go to bar replay. Let's look at this area here. So prices have come up this week. This area here, saw that there was obviously a trend line here, right? You've got some horizontal support and resistance as well. So you had resistance, 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 resistance. So this has been used as an area that traders would have been looking at. You had our supply zone here as well, right? So you had a cluster of potential supply coming into the market, and then we also had the 50 MA, right? One of the 50 MAs, SMA, I think it was the SMA. This is the SMA as well, simple moving average, coming into this area here, right? So I knew that there was going to be some supply here, right? And this is purely just from a technical analysis perspective. Fundamentally, there's Brexit hanging over the pound. So I don't necessarily want to be, I want to be a buyer fundamentally of the pound. It's just that there's going to be some negative sentiment, right, around the pound. You know, the closer we get to this this Brexit deal, and the fact that there is no deal at the moment is weighing heavily on the pound. But from a fundamental perspective, the pound is you know, ahead of the Swiss. But so it's just purely a sentiment play. Then what I did is went down to the 8-hour chart, which is one of my favorite time frames for trading, and that was this area here. We put in this outside candle, right, and pretty much this was the entry right here, and this was the short, which I ended up taking profit just below around this 1.308 level, which is around here towards the end of what was considered the range, right? So whenever you're trading ranges, right, what you want to do is either take it to fair value or at least to the bottom of the range, and as long as you're going for more than a 2-to-1, obviously more than a 2-to-1, but more than a 1-to-1 would be the best you know, target to kind of go for. 2-to-1s, 3-to-1s, or what you really want to try and aim for, but anything more than a 1-to-1. And that's pretty much my trade broken down in really the simplest form. And there were some other things going on as well, but from a, you know, supply and demand, technical analysis, basics perspective, this was, you know, the setup, right, where we had everything kind of lined up, and then it was just literally take the trade to the downside, and it worked out. And we just, you know, it's just probabilities at the end of the day. It was on my side, and you know, manage your risk, and then that's it. So I hope you find that a bit useful from a trade setup perspective. So moving on to the euro dollar. Let's clear those. So we've got this week prices come down into this demand zone here, and we're in a bit of no man's land when it comes to, I say no man's land, but more around fair value, above fair value. What we want to see, well, what I'm looking for is prices to come a bit higher before looking to look to short this currency pair, right? And if you're looking to be a buyer of the euro, then you'd probably be looking for prices to create a demand zone before looking to get long. So if prices make this new high, you'd be looking for a pullback, and then this would be your area of demand, right? It'd be right here, yeah. But we need to see that basically break past this high before putting on that demand zone. And again, apply your technical analysis basics to this area here. If you're looking to be a short seller, right, buy the dollar. If you're looking to be a, you know, long, get long on this currency pair, you can do the same thing long term. Zoom out in the daily and the weekly. So prices again could be contained between this high and this low for the foreseeable future, right? Euro yen prices came up to this area here, started selling off. We've got our first hidden demand zone right there, so you could look for price action, and prices come down into here. Prices do come back up into this area here. This is the first area you'd be looking for a short trade. And again, if prices don't hold here, this is where you're looking for long trades. Prices don't hold there, this is where you're looking for short trades. And again, just apply your technical analysis basics to these areas. Moving on to the euro pound. We've got an area of supply which we're coming up into, and prices are reacting. So this could be your area to try and look to get short. Your first area to try to look to get long is going to be way down here. So if prices do come down, that would be the first area to try to look to get long, unless prices create a demand zone, right? And what I mean by that is, if you get rid of that, what you'd be looking for is something like this, right? If prices come down, prices make a new high, then this is going to be your area of demand before looking to get long, right? Moving on to the Euro Swiss, we are down into this this demand zone currently. So potential long trades, you know, on a lower time frame, and this would be your first area to try to look to get short. If you're looking for, if this area doesn't hold and you're looking for, you know, long trades, this would be the area. Again, what you can do is look for some support and resistance zones potentially within supply and demand areas, right? Again, diagonal and dynamic, right? Support and resistance within these areas to see if you want to be a buyer. Again, same thing applies if you want to be looking to get short. Euro Aussie, Euro Australian dollar, prices did come down into this demand zone last week, shot up, and we're really again between this high, what I'd consider probably this high and this low right here from a value range perspective, right? And then probably looking at, you know, this area here as an overall range. So that's the short-term range, that's the overall range, and this is what we would call you know, an expensive area, right? If you're buying the euro, if you're buying the Australian dollar and looking to get short, then this is probably the cheap area that you'll be looking to try and get short in, right, from this overall range. So prices could potentially come all the way down here and range between this high and this low, right? So you've got a pin bar here against supply, potentially look for a short trade. If you think that the Australian dollar is going to strengthen against the euro is going to get weaker, right? So looking at the Australian dollar, US dollar, again, we've bounced off of this demand zone, right? So we're looking at a potential range between that low and that high, and then our next range is between that supply zone. We've got one really here as well, right? So we've got fair value lining up, we've got a supply zone lining up, and then you just go down into your lower time frame, look for potential support and resistance zones. Right, that one might be a bit bigger, right? So yeah, maybe on an intraday time frame chart, let's look and see if we can see anything. This area right here, you can see it reacted last week as well within that zone. So you had an opportunity to get short here, again short here. But if prices do come up into this area here, the higher zone of this supply zone, this is where I'd be looking to try and get short on this currency pair. Prices come down into this area here, look to get long if you think that the dollar's going to weaken. And then we have the Australian dollar, Japanese yen. Prices have come down into this demand zone here. Overall range, if you're looking at it from this perspective, is really between here and here, and prices have been ranging. You're at fair value at the moment, so we could see buying here. Again, this is where you're looking to get short. We saw last week, this is putting this outside candle, so prices could potentially be on its way down, especially with risk off being in the market this week potentially. Trump tariffs, so a risk off environment would benefit the yen, and not so much the Australian dollar, but fundamentally the Australian dollar is the currency to buy, right? As they're on a they're economically they are actually stronger, but again, risk sentiment, keep your eye on risk sentiment, and the yen will benefit from risk adverse trading. So hope you enjoyed this week's supply and demand technical analysis. If you do have any questions or any comments, please leave them in the question section box below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you find this useful, and definitely share if you can, and take care. Hope you have a great trading week. So if you'd like to receive the best supply and demand Forex levels absolutely free, click on the link in the description box below, enter your email address, and we'll send you the levels that we have just analyzed in this video. You'll get all of the major Forex currency pairs, and you'll get regular updates and never miss a Forex trading opportunity.